Sitting on our table in St. Charles is a salt grinder with salt that we bought at the Dead Sea. I like it. It's especially salty. This summer, I'm using some of our devotional time to look at stories that I've never addressed in a sermon. Some of them, admittedly, on the weird side. Here's a weird and salty story for you. It's the story of Lot and his family. It's weird, tragic, and awful, wrapped up in one extended tale. You'll find it in Genesis chapter 19. We won't go into some of the really horrible parts, except this one part of the story that focuses on Lot's wife, Mrs. Lot, and the salty consequences that became of her. Long story short, some angels visited Lot's home in the quaint little village of Sodom near the Dead Sea. Lot quite generously offered the customary hospitality that was expected of people in the Middle East and of Jewish persons in particular. The people of the town, however, responded to these immigrant angels not with hospitality, but with the threat of violence. That's where we pick up with verses 15, 17, and verses 24 through 26. When morning dawned, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Get up, take your wife and 2 daughters who are here, or else you will be consumed in the punishment of the city." When they had brought them outside, they said, "Flee for your life. Do not look back or stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the hills, or else you will be consumed." Then the Lord rained on Sodom and Gomorrah sulfur and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plains and all the inhabitants of the cities and whatever grew on the ground. But Lot's wife, behind him, looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. One common view of Lot's wife turning to salt was as punishment for disobeying the angel's warning. By looking back at the evil cities, she betrayed her secret longing for that way of life. She was deemed unworthy to be saved, and thus was turned to a pillar of salt. Another view in the Jewish exegesis of Genesis chapter 19, verse 26, is that when Lot's wife looked back, she turned to a pillar of salt upon the sight of God, who was descending to rain down destruction upon Sodom and Gomorrah. One reason that is given in the tradition is that she turned back to look in order to see if her daughters who were married to men of Sodom were coming or not. Still another legend says that because Lot's wife sinned with salt, she was punished with salt. On the night the 2 angels visited Lot, he requested that his wife prepare a feast for them. As the story goes, not having any salt, Lot's wife asked her neighbors for salt, which alerted them to the presence of their guests, resulting in the mob action that endangered Lot's family. Those are nice stories, or at least fascinating stories. There is so much of the biblical story of Lot's wife that we can't know for certain. This much is certain to me. The older I get, the more that more of my life is behind me than is before me. No matter how much time I have left on this earth, I can say with certainty that there is more life in my past than in the future. It's tempting to me and maybe to many of us, to spend our days looking back. The Russian poet Anna Akhmatova has a poem written from the perspective of Lot's wife, in which she hears a voice inside her say, "It's not too late. You can still look back at the red towers of your native Sodom, the square where you once sang, the spinning shed, at the empty windows set in the tall house where your sons and daughters blessed your marriage bed." That same voice is inside my head and in my heart too, often calling me to look back. Its song seems to sing loudest when the way forward takes us to places we've never been, to a future that seems so less certain than the past. And the question becomes, how can we bless the past without focusing our life and faith there? And this is the trajectory of the whole of Scripture, especially Christian Scripture, that God is a God of the future, that the future is the primary place God dwells. And when we focus on that future, aren't we focusing on God? So I'll keep my grinder of salt on the table, an aid in my digestion and a benefit to my taste buds. But most of all, as a reminder that today, later today, and tomorrow, that the present and the future is where I'm called to focus. And in that, draw strength and hope. Keep your eyes focused forward, my friends.